Ladies and gentlemen, back by popular demand, I am joined once again by the intrepid L.A. Marzulli. Last time I talked with L.A., we decided we were determined to record a conversation about UFOs. So here we are. And it's very apropos to do this today because of the recent FOIA document dump that happened last week. So we're going to dive straight into that. But before we get into the discussion, I want to remind you about my upcoming Birthright Conference in Nashville, Tennessee, taking place from the 6th through the 7th of May. The conference will cover topics related to transhumanism, aliens, UFOs, and Bible prophecy. Due to the inflationary Biden economy that's jacking up the price of fuel and everything else, we are offering a $40 discount on the conference tickets. Use promo code BRANDON in all caps at checkout to take advantage of the discount. You can follow the link in the description of this video to purchase your tickets or for more information. I would also like to remind you to pick up a copy of my 5-star best-selling book, Birthright, on Amazon.com. LA, last week was a big week in the world of ufology. Something happened that I certainly didn't think would be happening anytime soon. And having talked to you the other day on the phone, I think it caught you by surprise as well. And that is that the government, the Pentagon, basically admitted, among many other things, that not only are UFOs real, which they've already made, they've already let that cat out of the bag a couple years ago, but alien abductions are also most likely happening, according to these documents, and most likely based on some of the language that's in the documents. But of course, you and I know are definitely happening, and so that to me is absolutely wild that the Pentagon would admit that in the documents. So before I kick it over to you, I just want to remind the audience of what happened last week. So on April 5th. The Defense Intelligence Agency released more than 1,500 documents regarding the AATIP program in response to a FOIA request filed in 2017 by the U.S. division of the British paper, The Sun. And the Sun paper filed that FOIA request right after the New York Times published their explosive article that kind of kicked all of this off, in which they discussed the Tic Tac UFO. The documents include government-commissioned scientific reports and letters to the Pentagon regarding the UFO phenomenon, including a fascinating report prepared for the DIA entitled Anomalous Acute Subacute Field Effects on Human and Biological Tissues. The report investigates injuries to human observers and anomalous advanced aerospace systems by anomalous advanced aerospace systems. It documents 42 such cases from medical files and 300 similar unpublished cases, and notes that these injuries were likely caused by electromagnetic radiation from, quote, energy propulsion systems and exposures to anomalous vehicles, especially airborne and when in close proximity. The list of documented injuries includes radiation burns, brain and nerve damage, heart problems, and sleep disturbances, among others. It even includes cases of, quote, apparent abduction and unaccounted for pregnancy, sexual encounters, experience of telepathy, and perceived teleportation. Now, there's a whole lot more in this document dump that the Pentagon had to release in response to the Sun's FOIA request, and people can go check it out. There's numerous articles about it all over the internet. In fact, the last week, at the end of the week, I saw reporting on this on, I believe, CNN, definitely Fox News. Tucker Carlson was on it. Brett Baer was on it. It was all over the news. And so, we thought that the rollout of disclosure that happened in 2017 was shocking and astonishing. But I think this tops that. What say you, L.A.?
I'm right there with you, Tim. I never thought in some ways I would live to see where we are as far as the rungs on the disclosure ladder. Commander David Fravor, 2017, Tucker Carlson, that's the first rung on the ladder. Second rung, Luis Elizondo, Tucker Carlson, we've got metal from crashed UFOs. Third rung, Christopher Mellon on Tucker Carlson. Hey, we've tested the metal. It's got isotopes that are not found on this planet. Surprise, surprise. Fourth rung on the ladder. The Pentagon states that they have in their possession off-world vehicles not made on this earth. It's like, am I making this up? Fifth rung is when the UFO, the 9-page UFO report is released, and I think it's 144 or 143 sightings. Only one of them they can disprove. So that's it. 9 pages. Meanwhile, cow flatulence, 1,000 pages on cow flatulence. UFOs, we get 9. That's our government working hard for us. The sixth rung, which is where we are now, is the idea they're talking about offhandedly. It's the breeding program. It screams Genesis 3:15. It's the seed of the dragon. It's the days of Noah. It's even the elect would be deceived. It's everything you and I've talked about and other researchers, literally some of us for decades. My phone doesn't ring. I get a few emails. That's it.
Me too.
I mean, the church is beyond ambivalent. It's like it's head in the sand so deep it has no idea where it is. And I grieve for that, because this thing is coming down. And I never thought we'd see what we're seeing right now, but we're seeing it. And the idea that, oh, wait, women are getting pregnant? Well, what is that? That's called a hybrid. What is a Nephilim? A Nephilim is a hybrid between fallen angels and the women of earth together. Boom. The procreation creates this unholy union, unholy being in a fixed state, a soulless entity, in my opinion. I had a report that came over my desk. I read it today on today's report of a man that was at a fast food restaurant, and he goes to pay the woman at the window, and she gives him the food, and he hands it to his buddy in the truck. There's your food. He goes back to get his bag, and as he's looking at the woman, half the face has gone alabaster. The eye is like big and blue, and she realizes that she's just shifted. And he sees her, she sees him, and she backs away, covering her face. I'm not making this stuff up. I wish I was. They're here. They're walking amongst us, as Dr. David Jacobs' book stated years ago now. I think he's in ill health the last time I checked. So, I mean, this is it. And the fact that they're alluding to this, and it's amazing how, you get guys like Jeremy Corbell, and, God bless Jeremy Corbell. He got to the front of the class, but he took our stuff that we did from the alien abduction, and he took it and used it in his film and never gave us credit. That was not the agreement that we had with Corbell. So am I angry? No, of course not. How can I be angry at anybody? That won't work. But the bottom line is, that's not really a fair way to play. So he's been catapulted to the top, and everybody goes to him. Meanwhile, the Christian paradigm, the Christian worldview, for the most part, is kept in the wings. We're not allowed to speak, or we're not asked to speak, I should say. But we can do it here, and I keep waving my hands frantically every day in my daily show. This is the coming great deception. There's no doubt about it. When they show up now, not if. It's not if anymore. It's, set your watch. It might happen tomorrow. Who knows the way things are going. Everything will change. Absolutely. Life as we know it will do a 180-degree turn, and people don't get this.
The Pentagon seems to be framing the UFO phenomenon as a national security threat.
Yeah, exactly.
And that is definitely borne out in these documents. That's exactly the way that it's being studied. That's why Congress is now interested. They want reports. They want a briefing every year. I think it's at least once a year, maybe more than that. They want a briefing at least once a year from the Pentagon on the status of the UFO phenomenon, because they're concerned about a national security threat. And the reason why everybody's concerned about national security threats all of a sudden is because the nature of the phenomenon is beginning to shift. Before, it was very ambiguous, and these craft were evasive. The UFOs were very evasive, but now it's almost as if they're harassing our battleships, as if they're harassing our fighter planes and our pilots, and even in some reports hovering above our secret military installations. We know that in the past, UFOs, I live in Montana, up here in the north in Montana, a UFO is documented on record to have shut down a nuclear silo up in Great Falls. And that kind of activity is now increasing. And so it feels like the Pentagon is trying to get in front of this story. It feels like a forced disclosure, and that's why it's happening in such a dripped fashion. And the Pentagon it's their arms being twisted into this. I don't think they want to disclose this information. I think they have to at this point because the phenomenon is forcing them. What do you think?
Well, it's interesting. I remember writing about this years ago that in the days of Roswell, this group of men who were in charge said, no, that we can't let this out of the bag. And we all know that Roswell was real. I mean, the way it's just like
no question about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a total joke at this point. And I really believe at some point we will see the crash wreckage. They'll have video. They'll show the video. They'll apologize. What it was, the old guard who controlled the narrative in the days of Roswell, they're all dead. They're all gone. Mm-hmm. Many of them were probably 40 and 50 years old, late 30s up to the early 60s, right before you retire out of the Air Force. The old guard is gone. So the new guard that came up under them is looking at this thing 70 years later, right? Now they're in their 50s and they're kind of going, you know what? This isn't working anymore. And this is why I think in the 90s, you had people like Carla Turner and others who got cancer, if you got too close, you got whacked. They heart attacked you. And this sounds like conspiracy stuff. Do some research. You got heart attack, you got cancer that was incurable. You disappeared, you got threatened, whatever. Now they don't care anymore. They don't care anymore. When we released a story in Watchers 10 on the Kandahar Giant, I was threatened by a guy from the deep state. We were way too close to home on that. They know all about it. They've already got the DNA from that thing. Who knows what they're doing with it? We don't have a country anymore. What we have is separate fiefdoms within this veneer, the facade of a government, but it's not for the people or by the people. And the politicians realize that most Americans are too busy going hand in mouth, and it's designed that way. With the taxes and everything else, it's designed to keep you poor, keep me poor, the whole system. So in order to get ahead, you got to make a lot of money to get ahead. And there's the government. The more money you make, the more money they take. Mm-hmm. That's how it works. So it's not by the people or for the people. The 2020 election, I think, bears that out. But whoever is in charge, and there's a shadow government that's running the thing. But what we see is the facade of government. Most of these guys are compromised. Who was it? I know I'm going down a rabbit hole, but I'm going somewhere. This Cawthorn said, what was it, a week ago or 2 weeks ago? These freshman congressmen, he gets there right off the bat. Hey, come on to the party. He got some chicks there and some prostitutes, some young girls and some cocaine. So he reports on that immediately. McCarthy, snaps him on the wrist. Oh, no. Maybe McCarthy's compromised too. They all are. Most of them are compromised, which is why you never hear squat from them. You get a little handful of Republicans. You would think, well, what happened to the couple of other 100 Republicans? Why don't we ever hear from them? Why don't they do anything about the 2020 election where rampant fraud happens? Well, they're controlled. So that being said, the entire narrative is being closely managed. I disagree somewhat with you. They know exactly where they're going. That's what I think. They've got this thing planted, plotted out. We're on the 6th rung. They've got, another 10 rungs up before full disclosure. However, the wild card here might be, and this is where, to your point, it could be, and I agree with you on this, maybe they're being pressured by them. You either reveal this stuff now, or we're just going to show up. And then you're going to have to deal with it. You're going to have to pick up the pieces. So, we don't know. We're just two researchers outside the loop. Mm-hmm. But we've done enough research on our own. We both realize that this is the coming great deception. This will change everything. You've been talking it for decades. I've been talking it for decades. And here we are. And they're rolling it out, Tim.
They're rolling it out. And, I believe that one of the reasons why the Pentagon has had an ironclad policy of disclosure up until 2017 was because if the public were to find out that elements of our government, the military-industrial complex, elements of the military-industrial complex, knew about, and not only knew about UFOs, but were in fact in possession of crash retrievals and were involved in reverse engineering and so forth with the military contractors, that information would then, it would imply also that the government has known about the abduction phenomenon.
Absolutely. They're in cahoots with it.
Exactly. And the abduction phenomenon isn't just, hey, look, strange lights in the sky or weird little tic-tac things that are flying faster than our fighter jets and so forth, evading our best equipment that we have out there. No, this is up close and personal with citizens of this country that the government has been covering up, that people are literally being taken by these entities. How long has the government known about this? How come the government didn't inform the public? If this is a threat to not only national security, but directly to the health and well-being of the citizens of this nation, well, then that doesn't look very good. That doesn't look very good to these organizations, the institutions that are supposed to be protecting the public. And I think that's one of the primary reasons why there was that policy of non-disclosure, that ironclad policy of non-disclosure, all the way up until a few years ago when it was finally broken. So this is a very interesting situation that we have because now the cat's out of the bag. Abductions are real.
Yep.
And the government's own studies are suggesting, their own studies now we know, are suggesting the Pentagon is being informed that people are being subjected to quote unquote apparent abductions. And what did they call it? Unaccounted for pregnancies. So there doesn't seem to be, from my perspective, any way that the Pentagon can wiggle out of the bad publicity on this one. I mean, because that would be my first. If let's say that I was just some person who never did any research into the UFO phenomenon, never researched the abduction phenomenon. And suddenly, all of a sudden, I now have to take this phenomenon seriously because of the documents coming from my government. And now I also have to deal with the reality that not only are there UFOs, but these entities flying these things are abducting people. I'm going to be pretty upset that the government has been lying for all this time and allowing people to be abducted, or at least not informing the public. And so that's why I feel like that's sort of a long explanation as to why I feel like their arm is being twisted on this, that they're trying to get in front of the story to manage it. They're trying to manage public perception. So I agree with you that the release of the documents and the way that they're being treated in the media is definitely being managed.
Yeah.
It's being managed, but I don't know that the Pentagon is very excited about having to.
I agree with you there. I don't think they're going, hey, guess what we get to do? They're looking at this, trying to save face, and how do we backpedal? You know, once you lie, you lie. And once you're caught in the lie, then you're screwed. So you either own up and mea culpa, right? Or
which our government never does that.
Well, they don't. They never apologize.
I mean, they've been obfuscating, they've been persecuting people, and they've been, dare I say, killing people for decades over this topic, over this issue, especially as it pertains to the abductions. And by the way, you open that abduction door, guess what else is behind that door? Military abductions are behind that door. Which that is something I guarantee you the Pentagon doesn't want to talk about. And you mentioned Carla Turner. Carla Turner was one of the abduction researchers who really drilled down on the military abductions because she was abducted. Her husband, her whole family was being abducted, and her husband had some very brutal military abduction experiences where he was brought onto bases, Air Force bases, and other kinds of bases, and very aggressively interrogated because yes. Elements of our government, I call it the dumb state because the deep underground military bases. Right. It's the dumb state. Right. It's the dumb state that knows about the UFO phenomenon and the grays and the abduction. It's not your average Joe working at the Pentagon. There's probably only a handful of people working at the Pentagon who even have the clearance to know about the black projects reverse engineering the crash retrievals. I mean, those projects are so highly compartmentalized. They're cosmic level clearance, and much of the work is happening literally a mile beneath our feet in the deep underground military bases.
And I certainly concur with that. I mean, I've written about that not only in my Nephilim Trilogy, which was fictional work, but the third book in the trilogy, The Revealing. I mean, we get down into these deep underground tunnels and underground bases, and this is where everything happens. You know, the fourth rung on the disclosure ladder just blew me away, because we've been talking about the sixth rung, which just happened last week, which blew me away further too. The idea of abductions and people being taken. And, you know, I love it when they go, and guess what? Women are being impregnated. Well, they don't go the next step. Well, what happens to the pregnancy? What happens to the fetus that's there? Well, they know, but they're just not telling you that. Mm-hmm. They know exactly what's happening. The woman is taken in the first trimester, usually in the third month. Mm-hmm. She's re-abducted. The fetus is gone. No sign of an abortion, nothing like that. She goes to her OBGYN. He's scratching his head. They saw it. She was pregnant, but it's gone. And they have no explanation. I interviewed a woman 3 weeks ago at Hear the Watchman. And, you know, she gave me an email. And so we hooked up in Dallas. And I had no idea the depth of this story. It'll be in an upcoming film, probably the next one, number 3. Number 2, by the way, is almost done. That'll be free on YouTube. But 3, 4, and 5, we need to make some money here. So no more freebies. But she, lifelong abductee until she became born again and spirit-filled. She was impregnated 3 different times by them, lost a child 3 different times. And when we did like a 2-camera shoot with her. And the facial expressions, the body language are just like, I mean, you know, I'm living it with her, sort of, because it was visceral, very, very intense. And she talked about one night after she was born again, remarried, right? All this happened before she was married the second time. Now, you know, born again, spirit-filled, good, God-fearing husband, the whole deal. So she hasn't been taken, nothing like that. One night she wakes up, husband switched off, of course, mm-hmm. and she looks over on the side of the bed. There are 3 boys standing there. Mm-hmm. And she realizes instantly they've come to see their mom. That's what they've come to see. And they look human, but they also look alien. They can't pass because it was too many years ago. The stuff that's coming out in the last 20 years, whatever, like the one where we interviewed Al Matthews, that woman could pass. She could pass. I mean, she had the dark glasses wrapped around her head, and like almost like swimmer goggles, but they weren't goggles. They were like, welding glasses almost, something like that. But they were glasses. And when she took them off and she mounted him, which I call him to account on this. You got to see the video. It's free on YouTube. L.A. Marzulli, just go to any of our YouTube videos, open the text box below. There's the link. So Al's sitting on the chair, and, right before that, let me go backwards. So Al meets this woman, never met her before in his life. Okay. No idea who she is. He's going to move her. He's a professional moving guy. He moves people. She's just come from Kuwait. That's a red flag, with a shipping container. They're in the freight elevator together, riding up to look at her stuff in the container. Okay. She leans forward. It's just Al and this woman. Never met this lady before. She figures, well, maybe she's got something wrong with her eyes. That's why she's wearing the dark glasses. We see blind people do that. So he's respectful. He doesn't say anything. They're riding up in the elevator, and she leans over and she goes, "They're listening, Al." And Al goes, "Who's listening?" Already he's creeped out. And she goes, "Al, the Grays. They're listening. You and I know that you've been abducted many times, and so have I. And you and I were supposed to meet on the ship." And so, he kind of brushes that aside. That's UFO brain fog, because you're not dealing rationally. Mm-hmm. He gives the woman his number. So, and I say in the film, mistake number 1, sure enough, 2 or 3 weeks later, she calls him up on the phone. And Al goes up, and she's with a friend. She's still got the dark glasses on. The friend seems normal. They're out there on the deck beautiful summer night, drinking wine out of these huge goblets. And there's this deer fly that lands on the side of her goblet. And Al goes, hey, I'll get it for you. And she goes, oh, no, I'll get it. And she leans forward with her index finger like this. She doesn't grab the fly. The fly just adheres to her finger. And she brings it up to her mouth about 6 inches and goes like this, like that. Now, how do you do that? How does a normal human being do that? They can't.
Now, did she suck the fly in, or did she have like some sort of a lizard tongue that?
That's what I asked too. She sucked the fly in. How is that possible? How is that possible? So Al at this point is completely creeped out, but he doesn't do anything. UFO brain fog. Anybody else, right, in their right mind would have gone, whoa, 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 right? Doesn't do that. She takes off the glasses. She comes over. He's sitting on a chair. She mounts him on the chair and lifts up his shirt and goes, wow, you're well preserved. And I stop him and I go, Al, is this normal behavior for you? No one's ever asked him that question. And he does this. He's like trying to get the words out. No, this is not normal. UFO brain fog. That's exactly what we're looking at here. And she goes to kiss him. He pushes her away. The guys shapeshift. They go reptilian, yellow streaks, and she lets out the most evil laugh, according to Al, that you've ever heard in your life. He flees the scene. He goes to Gordy Tong's house. They call me. We Skype. We pray. 2 weeks later, Al comes across the line, gives his life to the Lord. He's been a lifelong abductee, and the abductions have stopped. Al Matthews became a centerpiece in that film, in the UFO film. This is all way too real. And what bothers me more than anything is even with the Pentagon admitting that the women are getting pregnant, but they don't go to the next step. What's happening in the pregnancy? Who's getting them pregnant? If it's not human beings, then it's a hybrid. And that speaks to Genesis 3:15. But you would think that, going back to the fourth rung, which is where I started this thing from, we have in our possession, it's the Pentagon, we have in our possession UFOs not made on this earth. I mean, and the phone doesn't ring, and I'm not invited anywhere, and nobody emails me. It's like the malaise, the ambiguity, the ambivalence, the head in the sand attitude. It's just it's mind. I don't get it.
Well, I think what that speaks to is how well we've all been conditioned already for this. And Hollywood's
the only answer.
Hollywood's had a big role in conditioning us, not only for the UFO reality, but also for the abduction phenomenon. There's been a myriad of films in which you've had abduction-like things happening in the films with aliens and other kinds of creatures, and films that were about abduction made back, what was it, in the 90s by Steven Spielberg, and Taken, I believe, is one of the films.
Yeah, Taken. Have you seen that? It's like a 12 or 13 part series.
I've seen some of it, yeah.
It is.
He was trying to be as accurate as he could be based on the testimony of abductees.
It's incredible.
And by the way, Spielberg has like a museum, from what I hear.
Yeah, that's what I've heard too.
That he has a museum with I think he's collecting the implants. It's one of the things that he has in his little museum, his little UFO museum, and so he's been very much aware of the phenomenon. I don't know if he was made aware of the phenomenon by elements of our government, maybe by the CIA, and then instructed to make films about it.
That's exactly what I think.
And I think that there's definitely that's certainly plausible. Yeah. Or if he just had an interest in the phenomenon, decided to make films. But whatever the case, we have been so well conditioned for this at this point that nobody's jaw is dropped to the floor. And you and I are probably, and it's kind of bizarre because you and I who've gone way down the rabbit hole with abductions and the whole alien phenomenon our jaws are probably dropped more than people who've never ever even.
I fell out of my chair.
Exactly, because you and I understand the implications of what's being said here, whereas a layperson who've never researched any of this, maybe just watched the movies, they don't understand what exactly we're talking about, what exactly the implications of alien abduction are. As you rightly said, it's a breeding program. It's about creating what Dr. Jacobs calls advanced hybrids, human alien hybrids, hybrids he calls them, and they're indistinguishable from human beings, except for they retain the powerful telepathic capabilities of the Greys, which means they can control you. It's mind control. It's telepathic mind control. And so you have I don't know why, but whenever I think about these hybrids walking around, like that woman you were just discussing, possibly a hybrid that ate that fly, I always think of these individuals, and again, I'm going to put this in a Hollywood context, and I'm not a guy that likes citing movies, but I find myself always doing it. But I always think of these hybrids as like Sith lords walking around, because they're not controlling the Force or something like that. Obviously, I'm referencing Star Wars here, but they can completely control their personal project. The abductees to whom they are assigned, because Jacobs also calls these hybrids, he calls them personal project hybrids. So what the Greys have been doing, according to Jacobs' research, for the last decade, let's say, since certainly probably a few years previous to the publication of his last book, Walking Among Us, is the Greys have been assigning their advanced hybrids, the hybrids, to abductees, and so the hybrids would couple with the abductee, and they would and the abductee would have to, on Earth, in our neighborhoods, would have to begin to teach these hybrids how to integrate into human society, how to do the most mundane things, what to do in a grocery store, how to pay for things, how not to look weird just walking down the street, how to act casual, how to drive a car, how to use a refrigerator, how to turn on a television. I mean, the most mundane things, how to use a toilet. And what you'll find in these personal project hybrid stories is that the hybrids, these hybrid beings, many of them that Jacobs documents is a male hybrid with a female abductee. These hybrids are extremely abusive to the women, to the abductees, and they completely control them telepathically. They control them, body and mind. And so imagine now not just these bizarre hybrids walking around, but these advanced hybrids who are otherwise indistinguishable from us, from other human beings, but yet have this powerful telepathic capability with which they can tap into your psyche and control you.
Yeah.
And maybe control mass populations. Who knows? Who knows what their abilities are? But they retain the telepathic capabilities of the Greys because they're not fully human. They are, in fact, hybrids. And so when we talk about babies disappearing from wombs and people being abducted, you and I know that means that's a verification of Jacob's work and the title of his book. They're walking among us. And by they, these advanced hybrids, indistinguishable from the rest of us. And
Tim, you and I should meet sometime. As Dr. David Jacobs says in the book, the best place to see them is at Walmart at 2 or 3 in the morning.
I don't think that anybody watching this is going to find that surprising. I think everybody's going to go, okay, I know what you're talking about. I know exactly. I've seen these guys.
That's where they mix in.
The Walmart people.
In Walmart, she emailed me a couple of weeks back, and I read her story. And of course, I interviewed her before I read the story. And she's in Walmart, and it's 3:00 in the afternoon, so it's not 2 in the morning. And this woman walks down the aisle. She's over 10 feet tall, Tim. She's not ugly. She's beautiful looking. It's not a guy in drag or somebody on stilts or anything like that. She's wearing boots, very, very feminine figure, but she's over 10 feet tall. And everyone's stopping and looking up. This woman, who's about 5'3", came up to her hips.
Wow.
UFO brain fog.
UFO brain fog. That's
UFO
exactly
brain
right. And that goes, by the way, to the gay, that speaks to the Greys' ability to
shut you down.
they can shut you down, and they do that. If they're going to come, as you well know, LA, if they're going to come to a house and abduct somebody that's a member of a family, let's say there's a family renting a cabin over the weekend in some wooded area in the United States. When the Greys show up to abduct the person or persons that they're there to abduct, the rest of the people who are not a part of the abduction program are switched off. They're literally just comatose, just standing there, switched off. The Greys take the abductees, take them onto their ships, do whatever they're doing, all of the procedures related to the breeding program. They bring them back and then turn everybody back on. And nobody knows. Nobody knows that anything had happened. Everybody's a little bit brain fog, seems to be a little bit missing time. Some people have strange memories that were implanted into their minds. The abductees return with screen memories. They're not even allowed to try and recall the memories in most cases. There's firewalls, psychological mental firewalls that are put in place to inhibit them from even desiring to try and remember what happened. That's a whole nother conversation. And so when you talk about UFO brain fog, you're talking about it's both a technological capability by the Greys, maybe has something to do with the implants as it pertains to the abductees, but also B, it's a telepathic power that they also have to where, and I talked about this in a previous interview with a friend of mine, they have the power to control to some degree your perception of events. Yeah, and I think that goes both especially for abductees, there's no question about that, but also the bystanders who happen to be in the zone of abduction, let's say, when it's time for the Greys to come and grab their abductees. So and if you multiply this out and you think about how many people are being abducted, Jacobs and I forget who else worked on this with him. I can't remember at this point. I think it might have been Bud Hopkins. Yeah, they created this test. I'm sure you know about this. They wanted to try and get a feeling for how many people were being abducted in the populace in America, and so they created this questionnaire. And they had people fill the questionnaire out, and they were it's in the book, it's in Jacob's books, and maybe Hopkins talked about it too, the late Bud Hopkins. And it was a very well formulated questionnaire to filter out all the weird stuff and to get real abductees, to be able to identify real abductees, and it had a high degree of accuracy. Also, they could verify that their questionnaire had a high degree of accuracy to identify abductees. They ended up coming back with I believe it was 5%. They estimated of the populace of America was being abducted. 5%. That is an enormous number.
A lot of people.
That's an enormous number. When you talk about 300 some plus million people in the United States, 5% of the population at that time. And as we know, the abduction program is growing exponentially as the population grows, as each new family is integrated into the abduction program, because it is hereditary. They abduct family lines.
Because they're looking for certain bloodlines, certain traits of a DNA. They're creating hybrid entities. Jesus warns us of all this. Men faint for fear from what's coming upon the earth. Even the elect would be deceived if that were possible. Be like the days of Noah. How many times do we have to talk about the days of Noah? What differentiates it is the Nephilim. And that's why if you believe in the Sethite theory, good luck. You'll never understand the rest of your Bible. You won't. You'll never understand why the judgment comes down at the Tower of Babel, Abraham and the 5 kings, Sodom and Gomorrah, finally what happens with the conquest of Canaan. And the Antichrist, he's the son of perdition. He's the seed of the dragon.
Hybrid.
It's Rosemary's baby. That's what it is.
I 100% agree. 100%.
Anyway, I got a buzz soon.
Yeah, so you got to jump. So that's a good spot to end this. We can have a part 2 of this conversation in the future.
We could.
but thanks for coming on, L.A. And what do you have going on? Where can people find you? And when is your film coming out?
The film will be released probably in the next 2 weeks. before the end of the month. And we'll make an announcement and get that out. I'm also going to release it on the PTL network, part 2, to show people what's going on. It's just way too important. Way too important. People need to understand that this phenomena is real. And, we're only talking about UFOs. So we talk about UFO sightings and abductions, back engineering. That's tonight. But then you get cattle mutilations, human mutilations, crop circles, and no one wants to talk about those things. You start putting all that together, and you're looking at a phenomenon that's just mind-boggling.
Skinwalker Ranch.
Skinwalker Ranch. Yeah. So lamarzulli.net. onthetrailwithla.com, onthetrailwithla.com, lamarzulli.net, PTL Network, weekly show, 11 o'clock. You'll never remember all this, folks, but anyway, good luck on the
I can put some links in the description, so I'll put some links to this stuff in the description.
YouTube, I do 2 shows a day. One is on YouTube. That's the user-friendly one. The other one is Politics, Prophecy, and the Supernatural over on Rumble, BitChute, and Roku. So I'm a busy guy, and just continuing to do it. Tim, it's always good to see you.
You too, LA.
We'll talk on the other side of this after you hit stop recording about the conference.
Thanks for the time.